Hey guys, welcome to this webinar. We are here with RightNow Media. They are one of our sponsors for the Boise Online Conference. We're super excited to have them with us. They have been championing for years the ability for churches to get the gospel out across various platforms, namely online streaming video. They have really helped churches up their game. And what we're hoping today is that you will be able to up your game by listening to them as video experts, really. I think we were all kind of forced out of the frying pan, but then into the fire of not knowing exactly what we were doing and how to do it. And so we're joined today by Taylor Empkey of RightNow Media, and they want to help you make disciples. It's not just about making videos. These videos have a purpose. They're about mission, they're about the gospel, and they're about the kingdom. So Taylor, welcome on today. Good to have you.
Yeah. Thanks, Peyton. And thanks to really all at Exponential. We are, as a ministry, just incredibly grateful to be a part of not only today's webinar, but the entire Boise Online Conference. Just a little bit about myself, because I do think that's important. As Peyton shared, my name is Taylor Empkey with RightNow Media. I've been with RightNow for over 4 years in varying roles, and it's been incredibly exciting really over the last 2 to see the strides that have taken place within the ministry out of a heart to just better serve the local church. As some of you may be aware, the primary way that we do that is through RightNow Media, which is an online discipleship platform, very similar in look and feel to Netflix. But as I like to say, instead of the action films or romantic comedies that my wife may say I enjoy, our heart is to come alongside local communities, local church communities, to help them meet their people in terms of everyday discipleship. So all that we do is done through the local church with the desire to, as I shared, come alongside and meeting folks as they're growing personally, with spouse, with kiddos, and the way that they're stewarding their finances and the way that they're leading in the marketplace. Even more prevalent today in the ways that they are possibly working their way through anxiety and depression as they're tackling topics such as racial reconciliation, those sorts of topics. Our heart is to be an extension of what churches are doing to meet folks again in their everyday discipleship. And our goal for the last 40 years as a ministry has been to advance the gospel through serving and equipping the local church. And I think what is super prevalent to tee up our conversation today on how to further engage folks in their own everyday discipleship, really on the back of the reason why RightNow Media, the platform, even came into existence. About 10 or 11 years ago, during our conference that we've hosted in Dallas-Fort Worth for a number of years, we were holding an open forum, basically, for pastors to come and gather, and we just began to ask them questions as to what their experiences were like, what their pain points were as pastors and as leaders within their local communities. And we were astonished by what we were hearing, because it was said in different ways, but the core of what they were saying was very similar. And the first is, man, our people are really, really busy. There's always something going on, it seems now, with soccer practice and this and that. There's just always something going on. The second thing that we heard from these leaders is our people are outsourcing their faith. Now, let me explain that a little bit more. What they were communicating to us was there was a belief, not necessarily intentional, obviously, that they, as the senior pastors, were supposed to be the primary disciplers of their folks on the week to week, or that's at least the way that their folks were looking at them. And they thought, man, this is an idea that we're seeking to push against continually, because we want our folks to be diligent in their efforts of engaging and growing on the day-to-day within their family units personally, in line with what obviously we're pouring into them on Sunday morning, Saturday nights, whenever that may be, through groups, those sorts of things. And so what can we do to better equip our people and meet them in this fast-paced reality that all of us are living in now? So that was one of the kind of the genesis points, you could say, of RightNow Media, and our desire to create a platform to help bridge that gap, so to speak, to make discipleship an everyday conversation as opposed to a once a week or I believe Barna says the average church attendee today is one who attends 1.8 times a month. So maybe it's more realistic to say once every 2 weeks. And so that was really one of the keys, one of the driving forces behind RightNow Media. And what I wanted to discuss today with everyone are 5 practical points, very easy to apply, whether you have RightNow Media or you don't, just to help increase everyday discipleship, especially coming out of this virus season that we've been in. Peyton and I were discussing beforehand how we've all, and by we I mean as a church body, we've had to call an audible, you could say, and maybe change the way that we've done things previously to meet folks in this new rhythm, at least this rhythm, this contemporary rhythm that we're in right now, as things are hopefully working their way back. So if you're a note taker, I'll be walking through 5 points, and then we will have a Q&A at the end where we can kick this around some more or talk about other topics. But as we start, I'm very much a visual learner. So these first 2 points that we're going to discuss, I would encourage you to think of those points as steps towards our destination. The last 3 points, imagine us making it to our destination, enjoying a Coke, a LaCroix, whatever your drink of choice is, and we are going to be looking back over the journey that we've just made in the first 2 steps, and discussing what success is, or what led those first 2 steps to be successful. So I want to encourage you to have that framework as we begin. And the first point I want to make, as we seek to just increase everyday discipleship, is to provide resources. It seems very cut and dry, but the more that I have conversations myself with pastors and leaders, and as they speak to their community, there is a hunger for resources. There is a desire for growth. I see this most as I'm talking with children's pastors and even youth pastors. They're like, man, I think I've learned that our parents, they want to be the primary disciplers of their own kiddos. They desire that, but they don't know where to start. And I think that is really a common theme across the church. And so if that's RightNow Media or whatever is the most easily attainable resources for you and your community, I would encourage you to provide resources to your people. And that can look a number of different ways. That could be physical books, maybe, that you're making available. That could be podcasts, maybe in-house resources that you guys are producing. That could be even through the Bible app and the different reading plans that are available there. There's a number of ways, but by encouraging your folks and providing resources, that's the first step. Because I would say that there is a desire, there is a hunger for growth, and it starts by actually providing folks some food that they can feast on. And again, there's a number of ways you can go about that in terms of what's going to serve your community best and what's most easily attainable for you and your community. The second thing I would say is provide direction. So what that looks like internally at RightNow Media, what we encourage churches that we partner with to do is to do a content campaign. So what that is, in our terms, is that is a church selecting a study on RightNow Media, whatever the study may be, and they're encouraging their people, maybe in a monthly rhythm, to jump into that particular study. So that could be just a monthly study that maybe doesn't necessarily apply to what the talking points are in maybe the sermon series that they're in. It may be more of a kind of a current event study, you could say, something that's speaking to something that's going on in the world today. Or it could just be about a book of the Bible, for example. That's what we often see that churches are selecting. But it provides a time frame. Really, it's a monthly study, and it gives folks content as well as direction. So we're providing them food and the utensils and teaching them how to use that as well. So that could look any number of ways internally for you. If you're using another source, again, podcast, an in-house resource, maybe that you and your extended team have created, whatever that may look like, providing direction for those resources as well is critically important. It may not seem necessary, but it never hurts to spell things out very clearly. Because for the folks, obviously, that do seek to be diligent in their discipleship, they may not need you to spell it out, but there certainly are some folks that would appreciate some direction with, okay, where are we going with these resources? And you could possibly, which we'll set up, or we'll talk about later on, set up communities to discuss these things. Now that may just be another way of saying setting up a group, but we will talk about some ways that you can foster conversations as well around X resource, whatever it may be. So those two things are getting us to our destination. Now let's sit back, let's relax, and let's kick around some ideas of how we can make those first two steps successful, not only now, not only the first month that we launch this possibly, but moving forward. The next thing I would say, point 3, would be make your encouragements to your people practical. Provide practicality is what I would say. And the reason I think that's important is, as I've already voiced in what we've heard as a ministry, maybe you've heard this from your own people, but just the daily rhythm, the daily speed of people these days is much faster than before. So there's always something going on is what I'm saying. In fact, I was talking to a pastor one time, and he said it like this. He said, man, a number of years ago, my experience is that church was always on the calendar and any other activities were just filled in around church. But church was never pivoted. It never moved. It was always there every single week, and everything else had to fill in. Now, it's a lot more common for other things to already have their place on the calendar, and then the decision has to be made, hey, does church fit this week on our calendar or not? That may be the reality that all of you can raise your hand and say, yes, that is the reality that we're experiencing in our community. So we do have to, I'll use the same phrase, call an audible and make sure that what we're providing in terms of resource and direction is actually something that fits into this rhythm. Because whether we like it or not, that is just the daily rhythm of most folks. And so for us at RightNow Media, we've had to consistently grow and develop. And what that's looked like for us, about 2 years ago, we released our audio only option. So what that basically does is it turns one of our studies into a podcast, essentially. So for me, I've worked with a lot of cowboy churches in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. And what's really cool is for the folks that I've spoken to, again, with the different cowboy church connections that I've spoken with previously, is they'll routinely come back and say, man, we've got folks who are out working, plowing, doing those sorts of things, and they'll just turn it into essentially a podcast, and they're able to engage as they're going about their work. So we do have to, again, continue to understand and know the climate that we're operating in. Another advancement that we made about a year ago, so a year later, maybe a year and a half ago, is we provided a download option. So for those of you that have used Netflix via your phone or your tablet, you've jumped on a flight or you've taken your family on a road trip, you have the ability to download resources through Netflix on your device without having an internet connection. Well, RightNow Media made that same ability available as well for those same type scenarios, to just hopefully make it easier for folks to connect and grow as they're going about whatever it is that they're doing throughout the day. So that may look different for you in your community, as I'm talking specifically to everybody with us today. And we have to keep this in mind as we're choosing our resource and we're choosing our direction, is, are we actually providing our folks something that they can do in their rhythms? I do think that's something that is important that we must consider as we're going about seeking to maybe build off the season that we're just coming out of, and how we've all had to pivot and make changes. We want the positive fruit that has come from this season to continue. And these are ways in which we can ensure that sustains. So just real quickly, the first, provide resources. The second, provide direction for those resources. The third, provide practicality. The fourth would be provide consistency. And what I mean by that is we have to be diligent in our efforts. There's a church that I worked with previously, and they were, if you think back to the content campaign idea that I gave you, recommending a study for the month, they've been incredibly diligent in doing that. In fact, they were, at least from my experience, one of the forerunners of the idea. And it's something that they've done continuously for, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 years now. And it's built this really cool sense of, I'm going to use the buzzword community because I can't think of something else, because it's just a normal part of their rhythm. They've got a monthly newsletter that goes out via email with that particular study, whatever it is, June's study. They've got some monitors in their lobby with scrolling announcements, and that study is on there as well. If they're choosing a RightNow Media original, they'll even throw up a RightNow Media trailer that helps to get folks excited about the particular study. And what's cool is what they found is that folks are waiting for service to start. They're just mingling in the lobby or in the pews. They've actually found that conversations are based on that study. So they don't have groups or anything set up around this study, but they just wanted to provide another layer of discipleship for their people on top of their groups, on top of their weekly messages. And this is one way to do that. And so again, that may look different for you in terms of what this looks like, what resources you're promoting, what direction you're giving, how practical you're making those. But being consistent in doing that is incredibly important. I love what John Maxwell says. He says, small disciplines repeated with consistency every day lead to great achievements gained slowly over time. Now that quote not only applies to us in leadership, but also we have to think about the way that that quote speaks to our people as well. By us being diligent in our efforts, by continually providing new resources that we recommend for Monday through Friday and beyond, providing direction, providing practical ways that they can engage with that, that is fostering a sense of everyday discipleship in our people, just by us being diligent. You know, month 3, month 4, for those that haven't jumped on, by them seeing our consistency in the matter, that's only going to share to them, hey, this isn't going anywhere. This new layer of discipleship for me and my family every single day is not going anywhere. And hey, let's begin to implement some of these things as well. So consistency is key. And then the last thing that I'll say, point 5, is to provide encouragement. And this is really, really, really important. And I think it's a great point to tie a bow on everything, because we need to continue to encourage our people. This shouldn't be how should I say this? This shouldn't be something this isn't the best way to say it, but that's held over our folks' head. It's simply a discipleship opportunity for them every single day. And the great news is when we're completing the first 4, resources, direction, practicality, and consistency, the more folks that jump on, the more folks that are going to want to jump on when they see how many folks are doing these just natural rhythms that the church has implemented. And again, formalize and fit this to your ministry fabric, to your DNA. There's obviously ways I could speak to the way that I've seen churches use RightNow Media in this regard. But if RightNow Media is not a tangible way of possibly serving you in this season, there's a number of ways that you can fit this to your community, so that we can ensure that we're building off of the positive fruit that this season, a positive fruit of the byproduct of this season that we're coming out of, so that we can ensure, man, if we mix these two worlds, if you were a community with thriving groups and consistent response from your weekend services, and maybe you were lacking a little bit in weekly everyday discipleship, this is a bridge of the gap of the two. And if maybe you were lacking of building just some commonality in your messaging, there's ways that you can fit these ideas in line with your sermon series, for example. I've seen churches that will align everything. So if their sermon series is on the book of James, let's say, then they're providing resources on the book of James. That way we're really solidifying and allowing folks to chew on the talking points, not just Sunday, not just maybe in small groups, but every single day. And it creates a deeper sense of understanding for our folks. So there's a number of ways that you can line this up and really fit this to your community. So I really do. I hope that those were tangible, practical points that are easily applicable to your community. If there was any aspects of this, any of these points that are maybe not as practical, I'd love to take questions on those if you guys have those, or even just for different ideas of the ways that Right Now Media is doing that, or even more suggestions on ways that you could possibly do that outside of Right Now Media. I'd love to speak on those. But again, I hope there was some tangible fruit from today's conversation that can possibly serve you in your community. So all that to say, I'd love to open this up to any questions that anyone may have.
Well, thanks so much for that, Taylor. We greatly appreciate you sharing your expertise. I mean, that's huge for us. Again, everybody all of a sudden became, experts, and yet everybody knows that we're not experts on what you're talking about. So we have a few questions here. Number one, do you have any data on, if you put out a resource like Right Now Media to a congregation, what percentage of church attenders will actually utilize the resource on their own just because it is, quote, available? Did you understand that question, or should I rephrase it?
No, certainly. I think that's a really needed question. I'm seeing that Joshua asked that. So Josh, thanks so much for raising that, because I think that's a really important question to speak to, because as much as I'd like to tell you that Right Now Media operates in the same way that Netflix does in terms of folks just automatically jumping on and engaging, that would be false. I mean, there does need to be some encouragement to your folks to actually engage with the resource. And the framework that we just discussed today provides a great way in which obviously Right Now Media slides right into, but it is important that there is some type of messaging, encouragement, advertisement, however, whatever word you wanted to use, if you are a church that's using Right Now Media, that it does stay in front of folks. That is really important. I would also say this. One of the things that we typically see, and what we would say is a church that's using Right Now Media in a really fruitful way, is typically when anywhere from 35 to 45% of the church's community, it has their own account. And the reason why we deem that successful is, much like Netflix or any other streaming service, typically you're going to have an entire household engaging one account. So like my wife and I, we're obviously on the same Netflix account. We don't each have our own. So that 35 to 45% of actual accounts is probably more indicative of 60, maybe 70+% of physical bodies. And that obviously can be spoken more to in context for a particular church. But overall, those are important factors to keep in mind in speaking to that question.
Very good. We've got another question from, we're going to go to one from anonymous attendee. Always good to see anonymous attendee. We get that anonymous attendee every once in a while. Good to see you again. What sort of change has Right Now Media seen during this pandemic, and more recently with the protests in content engagement on the site? Has there been a surge as people are searching for answers?
Certainly, yeah. So we've actually made a change, and I could potentially here. Let's see if I can share my screen to give you guys just a look at the platform briefly. In the virus season, when it was at its height, I guess is the best way to say it. We saw a surge in content on anxiety and depression, and so we sought to do our best to speak to that. So we actually provided, and we're still providing, a free limited library with all of the resources here on the top two channels. So any church or any person, even if their church does not have Right Now Media, you have the ability to jump on right now, create a free account through our limited library that I believe will be active at least for the next few months. And it allows you to actually engage with some of the resources that we feature in anxiety and depression completely for free. You'll also see, obviously, our channel there at the top, our studies on racism and racial reconciliation. This was added to the top, obviously, last week in the midst of everything coming out regarding George Floyd and what ensued from that. And so we seek to be at the forefront in providing resources to help meet folks as they're walking through, okay, what's my place as a Christian in this? And speaking for myself, what's my place as a white male and also a Christian in this? And so I'm incredibly grateful if I'm taking even my Right Now Media hat off for our leadership, and how we've sought to spearhead this. And we're in the midst of even seeking to provide more resources on these particular topics. But to answer the question directly, yes, we have seen a surge in content engagement on these particular topics.
Very cool. So Josh asked the question, when you think about the resources that people gravitate towards, how often do you find that people want teaching from someone that they know personally, like at their church, versus teaching from a teacher with a national platform?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question that I don't know that I have the answer to, because at least through Right Now Media, there's the ability to achieve both, because individual churches have the ability even to add their own content. So if that's, a set of sermons, if that's last week's sermon, for example, or if there's any content that churches are creating in-house, any discipleship type resources, there's the ability basically to intermingle the two. So not only can we have the perspective of our local church's pastors, but also maybe added with the perspective of someone like Dr. Tony Evans, for example, right alongside. So I don't know that I necessarily have a direct answer to that, because typically churches are able to achieve both through Right Now Media. So it's really kind of a both and, if that speaks to the question.
Yeah, it does. And just to let you guys know, these are fantastic questions. Thank you so much for these. These are really thoughtful questions. What I appreciate about Taylor is he's not fluffing. He's not faffing about. He's answering these succinctly and extremely well. So if you're there going, hey, I would leave it, but I don't think they'll get to my question, we'll probably get to your question. So if you have something you want to ask Taylor, I've still got a bay of questions here, but keep them coming. These are fantastic questions, and Taylor's answers are equal to your questions. So John Frady asks, can you share some churches who've done a good job with using Right Now Media in their discipleship strategy? So we're looking for specimens here, Taylor.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to see if I can actually share specific. Maybe I missed the name of who asked that question. Maybe we can link up offline. But I've seen a number of overarching strategies that have worked well for particular churches that are certainly applicable across the board. The first would be, again, as I'd mentioned, content campaigns, and leveraging content either in a quarterly rhythm, maybe a monthly rhythm, or on the basis of a sermon series that you're in. Because our heart is to be a discipleship extension of the local church. Right Now Media is not something else. And that's why we, obviously, I mentioned the limited library, but that's a free account for anybody to use. But if somebody wants to partner and be able to access everything, that's only done through the local church. And so that's why we, again, just seek to be an extension of what the local church is doing. So that may look different for the individual that asked the question and their specific community. But I've seen that as successful. We also have the ability through Right Now Media for, as I mentioned before, one to add their own sermons or any other conversations that they're filming, if that be a discipleship process or a growth track, something like that. There's the ability to drop that in what we would call kind of a training module with questions that correspond. That could be sent out to folks and in more of a kind of an educational sense, the ability for that to go out to leaders as they're growing within a ministry, for that to be sent out to the entire congregation. I've seen churches that will create devotionals. So Monday, they'll release a devotional based upon Sunday's message with questions that correspond, additional resources that folks can engage in throughout the week, so that it's really a cyclical conversation as opposed to individual one-off conversations every Sunday, you could say. It's something that folks can continually engage with. So Peyton, since we're speaking here, does that answer the question, you think? Or because I can certainly keep shooting if not.
No, that's good. That's really good. I apologize for the background noise here. I've got building going on at my house today. So talking about keeping it real during the COVID-19 crisis, I can't go out there and go, hey, everybody shut up, I'm talking about Jesus. So I mean, I could, but wouldn't be a kingdom move, would it? So anyways, Emily Hudson asks, have you seen these everyday, and like this is a yes or no question, so I'm going to change this question.
Yeah.
How have you seen these everyday resources translate to small groups or house churches?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what we've seen is one, the most fruit that comes from Right Now Media is in the everyday discipleship sense. I think by way of folks being diligent and maybe having resources more readily available at their disposal, that's been encouraged by the local church body that they're connected to, it just naturally produces a sense of wanting to discuss with others. And so, yes, we do have churches that provide Right Now Media resources to their small group leaders as somewhat of a menu that they can choose from their group. But certainly, it's also kind of the operated the other way. And it's actually brought about new groups by way of, hey, have you seen this? Man, you should really check it out, and let's talk about it. So that's certainly something as well. And we've actually sought to do our best to come alongside in that. So if you're accessing Right Now Media from the mobile app, in the same way that if I was reading a sports story that I thought was interesting that I wanted to drop into a text and send over to Peyton, you can now do that with a Right Now Media study. So if I jumped into The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby and I was like, man, there's some really powerful takeaways from this that is so pertinent today, and I had to send it to Peyton, I could actually share that into the body of a text message and send it over to him. So there's some different things that we've sought to put in play to make the connectivity between resources more of a communal event. Now, naturally it is, because it's done in the context of a local church and not complete one-offs. But it certainly does aid in helping to jumpstart conversations of faith by way of, again, man, have you seen this? Let's engage with it together. That's something my wife and I have experienced as we've walked through different marriage studies. So that certainly can happen. I don't know as much of like house churches spinning off necessarily. I don't know that I've just maybe had conversations directly about something like that with pastors, but certainly groups have been, it's been a catalyst for groups to start, certainly, to answer that question.
That's really good, Taylor. And Elizabeth Gooden is asking, and I love this question because this is where you get to kind of slip into, hey, I'd recommend you start with this particular product or this particular resource, which is always good, because what she's asking is, we're starting small discipleship groups at our church. Are there any resources you can recommend for a group of 4 to use, hoping to grow spiritually together?
Yeah, certainly. Let me make sure I'm actually sharing the
Yeah, you are. No, it's working.
Here.
We're
okay,
good.
Cool. Yeah, you're seeing what I want you to see. Awesome. No, that's a fantastic question, because we've sought to make our resources more conducive to a group environment. So any resource that you see with this orange banner above that says Right Now Media, that's going to be a Right Now Media original, kind of like a Netflix original. It's something that we've produced. And so we've created those strategically with a group in mind. And so typically in these studies, you're going to see anywhere from 4 to 8 studies that are going to range anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes. People don't typically want to sit down for 35 or 40 minutes and watch a video. But I can say confidently across all of our partnerships that our most watched and most popular studies are going to be our studies on books of the Bible. Every single month, as we've started to release these have been at the very top across all of our partnerships in terms of what folks are engaging with. Now, put simply, my thought would be it's simply because we're obviously just engaging with the text. But this is where I would encourage, I believe it was Elizabeth that asked the question. This is where I would encourage, Elizabeth, you to start is any of our studies on respective books of the Bible. And if there's one that you gravitate towards more than others, then by all means. But these are also going to be conducive to, you mentioned 4 folks sitting down and discussing together. And the thing that I appreciate as well is it also allows, if engaging through Right Now Media, every member of that group to be able to go back and chew on it even further in their own time, even outside of the group, because all of these resources are still available to them, as opposed to the group leader providing and then, bringing back with them, so to speak. But without getting too far off, this is where I would recommend you start. Studies on books of the Bible, and specifically some of our originals.
Very cool. All right. So LG Chikova says, how do you engage the whole church to be involved in discipleship, given the fact there's the giftedness that has a play in discipleship engagement?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's something that right now media is not, as I've somewhat mentioned in different ways before, it's not to exist on its own. It's something that's done in the midst of community, and the way that I like to think about it is as a layer of discipleship. It's really to be a tool used alongside group discussions, obviously, where you have someone who is facilitating and leading that group. It's really designed to be for that every other day of the week, outside of your group time, outside of your service time, so that folks do have something that's pertinent to them. If that be they're wanting to grow in how they're going about in leading their spouse, or if that be as they're seeking to grow in apologetics, say with content from the late Ravi Zacharias, just incredible content. So this more allows folks to grow in something that's pertinent to them, but maybe also alongside some different conversations that they're having in their group, or maybe that the church is having as a whole. I may have just misunderstood the question. So if so, I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's great, Taylor. I was going to say, if you don't mind taking off screen share for a second.
Yeah.
Just this brings up a really good point. And those of you that are watching, you don't know me, right? I'm content director of Exponential, but I'm also a church planning trainer. And so what I do is mobilize different, average everyday believers is the best, non-leaders, right? In order for me to do what I got to do, I have to constantly disciple others. So discipleship is kind of my jam, because I can't leave if I don't do that well. Think of the Apostle Paul rolling into a town. He's got a quick disciple, and then he's got to raise up leadership. So your question really kind of hits on something I'm passionate about. And I'll just speak to this for a second, Taylor, if you don't mind.
Please.
One of the cool things about what Taylor's offering is that you don't have to have the giftedness for like it's borrowed giftedness. That's what this is. You're borrowing someone else's giftedness as a teacher, but what you can do is lead discussion. And I believe that every one of us is called to make disciples, right? I actually think that you're able to do everything that discipleship requires, which is to teach what you know, to let the life that you live rub off on someone else. And then whatever engagement and ministry that you're involved in, you're able to take someone else with you. Now, we can all do those things. If you look at what Jesus did, he spent his time teaching, he spent time with them, and he engaged in tactics. So I call those the 3 T's of discipleship. 30 seconds or less here. This isn't my platform, but I just want to lean into this a bit, because what Rick Warren did is he had the purpose-driven life curriculum that he dispersed out. The way that Rick Warren actually planted multiple churches all over the world was through video groups. Because what he determined was this: anyone can pop a DVD into their DVD player. They can gather a bunch of friends, right? And so this is how church planning started on the ground for them. He said for every one of those groups, it only ran for about 6 to 10 weeks, right, depending on the study. At the end of that 6 to 10 weeks, what would happen is leadership would emerge. In other words, churches would get planted. They would be so good what they did together that a church plant would come naturally out of it. And in some cases, it wouldn't. And he would say, well, that's great, because the gospel went out during those 6 to 10 weeks. No harm, no foul, right? The goal wasn't to plant churches, but Rick Warren was like, hey, this is a springboard for seeding the gospel in a community. So if you can think of RightNow Media as that, discipleship is something you're meant to do. We're all able to do it if we understand it correctly. But this is like I said before, it's borrowed giftedness. They were borrowing Rick Warren's giftedness through showing those videos, and their own gifting was emerging in the process. So I'm a big believer in what Taylor's saying. I think this is something that could happen on a much bigger level if you had the boldness to take these tools, borrow someone else's giftedness, allowing the giftedness of those in your group to emerge during the process. Okay, next question. Do you want to speak to that, or I know that's a mouthful?
No. I'm totally in line with you there, and that's something that I hear from small group pastors is how can I raise up leaders to lead small groups. I mean, that's kind of my biggest deficiency right now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I often hear them say is, all that I need is availability and faithfulness. That's what I need. And we can take care of the rest. But those are the two things that I'm asking for. And so I think, to your point, that speaks to it in a way. So no, that was fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Peyton.
That's great. So Joshua Purcell says, if small groups are using RightNow Media for teaching, do they supply their own discussion questions, or are those questions sometimes on RightNow Media along with the teaching sessions?
Yeah, so so we've got over, I believe, 18,000 studies within RightNow Media. Every RightNow Media original, so again, the series with the orange banner above, is going to feature free supplemental resources that help leaders, or I guess that's probably the audience. They're leaders to facilitate a group. So there's no need to do any content creation. We do work with about 250 publishers as well on top of that. And obviously our focus is the video content. Sometimes there's supplemental pieces that we don't always get our hands on. But again, about 50% of our studies, including our originals, are going to feature free supplemental resources that help to drive a conversation forward for a leader if they're facilitating.
That's really good. All right. Well, Brendan Ash asks, and I love this, Brendan, welcome.
Yeah.
Brendan says, I am from South Africa. Does the content have international presenters, or is it mostly presenters from the USA?
Yes. Yes. I'll start by saying this. So as a ministry, we want RightNow Media to be reflective of the kingdom of God as a whole. And that's across the board. So to give you some examples of ways that we're adding and we're seeking to make RightNow Media more diverse in every way possible. About 2 years ago, maybe more, maybe less, we launched RightNow Media India. So we have a team in India serving churches out that way. And I believe we've added maybe 8 to 10 studies from Indian pastors. We also have a team in Argentina serving churches out that way, RightNow Media in Espanol. So not only do we have content from pastors down that way, but also content in Spanish. Not only that, we have teams that are launching. Maybe they've already mobilized. It's tough for me to say since I'm not in on that end of the ministry. But we're adding content consistently from folks across the globe, and that's only going to continue. Not only in terms of recognition or face, but also in different languages as well. Again, our focus right now is Spanish. But as we get that library to a place that we're satisfied, not that we're not going to keep adding to it, we'll turn our direction somewhere else. So our hope is that RightNow Media can be a benefit and be reflective of all people, but also beneficial for all people as well, no matter where they may find themselves, if that's in the US or in New Zealand, for example, and everywhere in between.
That's fantastic. Okay, so really good question here from Christian Tinsley. Christian says, I've really appreciated RightNow Media content personally. What's the best way to request additions to existing studies that you already offer? And I love this, specifically Ray Vander Laan's That the World May Know series, because that thing is fire. I'm with you, Christian. That thing is amazing. I've taken church plants in Europe. I was a European church planter. I've taken my group through that series, all of them, Death of the Rabbi, all of them. So she wants, or he, sorry, whichever you are, Christian, I don't know. You know, your name could be Pat, Chris, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know your sex. But anyways, yeah, so Christian wants to know, I can't use personal pronouns. Ray Vander Laan, any chance of seeing that?
Yeah, so we do have, and Christian, you may know this already, we do have a handful of studies from Ray. 4 specifically. It may not be the ones that you're looking for, though. I'm just doing a quick search here. But if you ever wanted to request studies, there's a link on our website that would be kind of hard to get to. So I may just send it to you directly. That may be the best way to answer that question. But there is a way you can do it. I guess I'll say that. Christian
is a he, by the way, just for so everybody knows. Thank you, Christian, for pointing that out. It's never helpful when you got a knucklehead as a webinar host.
Christian, it happens to me all the time as a Taylor, so I'm with you.
As a Peyton, I feel your pain, both of you. Trust me. I mean, Peyton means warrior, but it can mean warrioress. So Joshua Purcell, good questions. Everybody, great questions, by the way. Thank you so much. This has actually been a fire round of questions. I'm enjoying
Yeah,
this.
I'm loving it too.
So Joshua says, if a church partners with RightNow Video, is there a way to customize the log on or log off process to RightNow to increase engagement with local church discipleship process? Do you understand what that's asking?
I think I do. I'll go ahead and speak to it,
Sure.
Josh. And if I'm going the wrong way, then by all means, please correct me in the chat. But there's a number of ways that churches can make available to their people to get them connected. So the primary way is through what we would call our launch process. So when a church says, hey, we're in, church leadership then makes that announcement known to their people. Hey, guys, we partner with RightNow Media. We've got a gift for you. And typically, the first domino to fall is an email is sent to the entire community, giving them the option to click a link in that email and then create their RightNow Media account. Alongside that, we also provide churches with text codes, QR codes, and a custom link. So that allows you to really check off every single avenue that one may come across to get them connected. So you've got your digital means accounted for with the custom link. You can put that on your website, any social media pages. You also have the ability to take advantage of any maybe in-person or physical advertisements. If you've got handouts, churches will include in a visitor gift, maybe a card with the text code on there. Makes it really easy for somebody to pull out their phone and create their account. So I don't know if that speaks to your question. However, it is worthwhile to mention that there are a number of ways that folks can make their way into RightNow Media via the gift that their respective church has given to them.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that too. I'm wondering if the question, Joshua, is more like if you're discipling and people from outside are coming in, where you're like, if we were doing discipleship in a church planning scenario, that's an oscillating universe. It's increasing, decreasing. You got people dropping in, suddenly coming with a friend. You don't tell them, no, you can't join this group, because you're normally discipling unbelievers into believers. I mean, that's how it often works frontline. So I don't know if that's where Joshua's coming from or not, but well, it looks like we might be coming to the end of our questions. This has been an amazing round, guys. Good questions. Really, really appreciate it. So, Taylor, are there any other thoughts that you have, or any comments, any kind of final things that you want to say to those that are tuning in and watching with us?
I would say one, just thank you. Thanks for being a part of the session today. Certainly, if there's any questions that one may have, I'll find a way that's consolidated to this group to include my email. In fact, I may just drop it in the chat here. That way, all can take advantage of it if there are any questions. But just really appreciative of everyone taking some time to jump in. I believe we will be having another session similar, but fine-tuned. Thankfully, today was a nice first try, so to speak. So if you wanted to jump back on, I believe in 2 weeks, whenever the conference is going on, we'd love to see you again. But thanks to all, and I'm going to drop my email here in the chat if anybody has any questions for me.
Okay, so he's dropping his email in the chat, which is great. If you want to reach out to him personally, that's why he's here. It's Empkey at rightnowmedia.org. If you're watching this at a later date, that's TEMPKEY at rightnowmedia.org, just like it says on the box. So one more time, that's TEM for Mary, P for Paul, key, like what you put. So Empkey at rightnowmedia.org. So I like that. Empkey sounds like a tool, but I get that that's Taylor Empkey. So, yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much. Hey, and if you're tuning in right now, one of the cool things, this is just a piece of what we're doing at Exponential right now. You can go over to multiplication.org. You can check out something we have called the Hub. We're leading up to our regional conference for Boise. Of course, COVID threw us for a loop. We weren't able to go up to Boise and meet. That's coming up June 23rd and 24th. We're going to have our 2-day regional conference. But what's really cool is that if you go to multiplication.org, you can join the Boise conference, of which RightNow is a sponsor. And that's why they're here meeting with us. If you ever go to Exponential, make sure you check out the exhibitor hall, the sponsor hall. We carefully select the sponsors that we have. We don't just take people that want to make money off church planners. We're protective about church planners, protective about churches who want to multiply. And we believe that all of our sponsors are there to help you multiply, right? They're actually there to help expand the kingdom. Like, we have sponsors on our no-no list. Like, no, you can't ever be a part of our conference because it's not the ethos and heart that we share. So we believe in RightNow Media. They're often at a lot of, I saw you guys at DC when I was there a few years ago speaking, and I tend to see you guys around. I've talked with you personally. So these are good guys. Check them out, but also know that this is a part of the hub. In fact, we're doing talks like this later today. We'll be meeting with Ralph Moore. We'll be meeting with Dave Ferguson later in the week. We've been meeting with Daniel Fusco. We're meeting with a whole host of speakers, thought leaders, practitioners. And part of the hub is, now that we've taken this whole conference thing online, we're actually able to now interact with leaders like never before. You'll be able to do this with leaders and kind of up your game in discipleship, in multiplication, in leadership pipeline, evangelism. I mean, we have a ton of tracks. Church mobilization, how to get the congregation out of the pews and into the streets. I mean, we have a huge host of resources, 100 free ebooks, you name it, we've got it. So this is all part of your membership to the regional conference. If you live in DC, San Francisco, you can register there. With the cost of your ticket, you get access to the hub. And you don't have to live in Boise to come to Boise now, right? You can come to the online regional conference and boom, you're in, and you get to be a part of this membership that gives you access to these live interactive events. So I want to thank you today as our sponsor, Taylor, for coming and representing RightNow Media. I want to thank you for attending today, and we want to help you accelerate your multiplication. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for letting us be a part of your journey, and we'll see you on the hub.